They didn't leave you. You cut them loose. Every unanswered text, every skipped invite, every conversation that slowly faded into silence. People called it distance. They called it isolation. Some even called it self-sabotage. But what if they were all looking at it backwards? What if none of it was neglect? What if it was surgery? Because sometimes the healthiest thing a man can do isn't adding more people to his life. It's removing the ones who no longer belong. Most men will spend years trying to keep every relationship alive, terrified that letting go means they've failed. But a small number eventually reach a point where pretending becomes more exhausting than being misunderstood. Carl Jung noticed this long before modern psychology turned everything into labels. He described a type of man so uncommon that even today, most people completely misread him. Not antisocial, not broken, not emotionally unavailable, just finished with something most men never even realize they're trapped inside. And once you understand what Jung meant, you'll never look at your own solitude the same way again. So let's get into it. Jung spent decades trying to answer one question. Why can two men walk through the exact same world, yet experience completely different realities? Some people naturally move outward. They think out loud. They process life through conversation. They need movement, constant interaction, and the reassurance that comes from being surrounded by other people. A room full of voices energizes them. Silence makes them restless. But Jung kept noticing another pattern, a much smaller group, men whose entire operating system seemed to run in the opposite direction. Instead of looking outward for meaning, they searched inward. Instead of reacting to what everyone else could see, they followed connections almost nobody else noticed. He described this through what he called introverted intuition, one of the rarest and least understood psychological patterns in his work. This isn't simply the man who enjoys a quiet weekend. It isn't the guy who says he's an introvert because parties make him tired. It's something much deeper. This man doesn't process reality through approval. He processes it through patterns, meaning, symbols, connections that often stay invisible until years later. He isn't trying to fit into the room. Half the time, he's trying to understand why the room exists in the first place. That difference changes everything, because while everyone else is reacting to what's happening, he's quietly asking what it means. And those are two completely different ways of living. To everyone around him, he often looks detached, slow to answer, hard to read, even uninterested. But inside his mind, hundreds of thoughts are colliding at once. He's connecting memories that seem unrelated, questioning motives nobody else questioned, running possibilities far into the future while everyone else is focused on tomorrow morning. The silence people judge is usually where his real life happens. Jung believed every person wears what he called a persona, a social mask. In his words, it is a kind of mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other hand, to conceal the true nature of the individual. Think about how many masks you wear without even noticing. One at work, another with family, another with old friends, another online. Most people become so comfortable wearing those masks that they eventually forget there's anything underneath them. The performance becomes the personality, the approval becomes the identity, and because everyone around them is doing exactly the same thing, nobody questions it. The rare man eventually does. At first, it's subtle. He starts leaving conversations that suddenly feel empty. He notices how often people speak without actually saying anything. He laughs at jokes that don't even make him smile. He catches himself agreeing with opinions he doesn't actually believe, not because he's weak, because fitting in became a habit long before he ever questioned whether he wanted to belong. Then something changes. The mask starts feeling heavier. What once felt normal now feels unbearable. Every forced conversation drains him. Every social obligation feels like acting in a play whose script he no longer believes. And that's when people usually assume something is wrong. You've changed. You're not yourself anymore. You never come out. You disappeared. Maybe, or maybe for the first time, he's finally becoming himself. History is full of men who walked this road, even if nobody had Jung's language to describe it. Isaac Newton spent one of the most productive periods of his life in relative isolation during the plague years, developing ideas that transformed mathematics and physics. Nikola Tesla lived much of his life with few close relationships and often preferred long periods of solitude while pursuing his work. That doesn't mean solitude creates genius. Jung never argued that. What it suggests is something far more interesting. Some minds need long stretches of uninterrupted silence because that's where their deepest thinking actually happens. The modern world doesn't reward that. It rewards visibility, constant updates, fast opinions, immediate replies, always being available, always being reachable, always performing. But the man Jung described slowly realizes that constant connection often comes with an invisible cost. Every notification pulls his attention outward. Every expectation steals a little more of the inner world where his best thinking lives. Eventually, he begins protecting that space, not because he hates people, because he finally understands what too many people quietly take from him without ever intending to. Energy, attention, clarity, and once he notices that, it's almost impossible to unsee. That's when people begin saying he's become cold, arrogant, hard to read. But Jung saw something very different. He understood that this man's inner processing simply doesn't move at the speed of ordinary conversation. Ask him how he feels over dinner, and you're asking him to translate a language he hasn't even finished understanding himself. While everyone else expects an immediate answer, he's still watching the pieces come together. It isn't emotional distance, it's depth, and depth has always moved slower than performance. That difference is easy to misunderstand. The world rewards quick answers, fast opinions, instant reactions. But Jung observed that the deeper a person's inner life becomes, the less likely it is to fit neatly into ordinary conversation. Some thoughts need hours, others need weeks. A few take years before they can even be put into words. So when this man pauses before speaking, people assume he's distant. When he chooses silence over small talk, they assume he's judging them. When he disappears for weeks, they assume he no longer cares. Most of the time, none of those assumptions are true. He's simply living at a different pace, a pace that doesn't make much sense to people who process everything out loud. I noticed that in myself, long before I had a name for it. Friday nights used to feel like a countdown to something I never actually wanted. The group chat would light up, plans would come together. Everyone seemed excited, and somehow, I already felt exhausted before I even left the house. For years I convinced myself that was normal, that eventually I'd enjoy it the way everyone else seemed to, but I never did. Then one year, something quietly changed. I stopped forcing it. I stopped inventing excuses. I simply stopped showing up. Nobody dragged me away from that life. Nobody told me to disappear. I just stopped answering. At first I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt lighter. Not happier overnight, just lighter. As if I had finally put down something I didn't realize I'd been carrying. Maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've watched your phone stay silent for days, and instead of panic, you felt peace. That feeling confuses a lot of people because they assume peace and loneliness are opposites. Jung didn't. He believed they were completely different experiences. Let me put a face on it. Andrew used to run with the same group of 8 friends. Every birthday, every weekend, every football match, every late-night conversation in the same endless group chat. From the outside, he looked surrounded. Then his father died quietly on a Tuesday afternoon. Andrew sat alone in the hospital hallway staring at his phone. Hundreds of contacts, dozens of unread messages, one enormous question. Who would I actually call right now? Not to distract me, not to cheer me up, to simply sit beside me. He realized he couldn't answer. 6 months later, the group chat was still active. Memes, plans, arguments, inside jokes. Andrew wasn't. Nobody officially left. Nobody fought. Nobody slammed the door. He simply stopped opening it. And what surprised him most wasn't the silence. It was the relief. Like a man finally putting down a bag he'd been carrying since high school, because everyone else expected him to. That realization hurts, because it forces you to admit something uncomfortable. Being surrounded by people isn't the same as being understood, and that's exactly what Jung warned about. You've probably seen this conflict before without realizing it. Popular culture is full of characters who wear masks. Some wear them to gain admiration, others wear them simply to survive. Patrick Bateman constructs an identity so polished and socially acceptable that eventually almost nothing authentic remains underneath it. The performance becomes the person. Meanwhile, Arthur Fleck is constantly labeled strange, awkward, and unreadable by people who rarely try to understand the pain shaping his behavior. These characters are very different, and neither should be treated as psychological examples of Jung's theories. But they illustrate something recognizable. One warns what can happen when a man becomes nothing but his mask. The other shows the cost of living in a world that judges appearances faster than it understands people. Jung believed every man eventually faces a choice: protect the mask or discover the man beneath it. Very few choose the second path because it costs more. If any part of this reminds you of someone you quietly let go, or maybe the person you used to be, let me know in the comments. Sometimes giving something a name is the first step toward understanding it. Here's the part almost nobody tells you. Jung believed loneliness has surprisingly little to do with the number of people around you. He wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." Read that again. A crowded room can still be the loneliest place you'll ever stand if every conversation stays on the surface, if nobody knows what truly matters to you, if every interaction feels like another performance. The company changes nothing. For years, many men override that feeling. They laugh when everyone laughs. They nod when everyone agrees. They keep showing up to places that quietly empty them. Not because they're fake, because belonging feels safer than honesty. Jung believed this is what happens when we borrow our identity from the collective. We become who the group rewards, not who we actually are. And for a while, that works. Until life interrupts the performance. Sometimes it's betrayal. Sometimes it's failure. Sometimes it's losing someone you thought would always be there. Sometimes it's simply waking up one morning and realizing you've spent years living a life that doesn't even feel like yours anymore. Whatever the trigger, something breaks, the old mask no longer fits, and for the first time, silence feels less frightening than pretending. That's where Jung introduces one of his most important ideas: individuation, not self-improvement, not becoming perfect, becoming whole. The slow, often uncomfortable process of separating your real identity from every role you've been taught to play. The obedient son, the funny friend, the reliable employee, the people pleaser, the man who keeps everyone comfortable except himself. Most people experience this gradually, one lesson at a time, one difficult year after another. But Jung noticed that for certain personalities, especially those with powerful inner lives, the process can arrive like an avalanche. Years of suppressed authenticity suddenly demand to be heard all at once. The correction isn't gentle, because neither was the pretending. Jung never romanticized this stage. In fact, some of his strongest words were reserved for it. He wrote, "Collective identities are crutches for the lame, shields for the timid, beds for the lazy, nurseries for the irresponsible." Harsh words. But his point wasn't that community is worthless. Far from it. He believed genuine relationships matter deeply. What he warned against was allowing a group to become your identity, because the moment your sense of self depends entirely on belonging, you stop asking who you are without it. That's why this process often feels painful. Family members wonder why you've changed. Old friends notice you don't answer as quickly anymore. People who benefited from the old version of you quietly drift away. Some will think you've become arrogant. Others will assume you've become cold. Few will realize you're simply becoming more honest. And honesty has a way of making old relationships uncomfortable. There will be nights when the silence feels enormous. Nights when you wonder if you've mistaken healing for isolation, growth for avoidance, freedom for loneliness. Jung would probably ask a different question. What is actually driving your solitude? Fear or clarity? Fear withdraws because it's trying to escape pain. Clarity withdraws because it has already seen the truth and refuses to keep pretending otherwise. Those two things can look identical from the outside. Only you know which one you're living. If it's fear, there's still work to do. If it's clarity, then the silence isn't your enemy. It's evidence. Evidence that you've stopped negotiating with your own conscience just to make other people comfortable. Jung believed that when a man moves through this process honestly, his standards naturally change. He stops measuring relationships by quantity. He starts measuring them by depth. 15 acquaintances no longer impress him. One genuine conversation becomes worth more than 100 shallow ones. Not because he thinks he's better than anyone else, because he finally knows what actually nourishes him. Everyone else becomes optional, not disposable, not inferior, simply optional. And that's a very different way to live. So maybe they didn't leave you. Maybe you stopped carrying relationships that only survived because you kept pretending. Maybe the silence you're living in isn't punishment. Maybe it's preparation, not for becoming someone new, but for finally becoming someone real. Because sometimes the rarest man isn't the loudest, or the strongest, or the most admired. Sometimes he's simply the one who had the courage to remove the mask, even when nobody else understood why. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more content that YouTube won't let me post, join my Patreon and my free newsletter. Also, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you won't miss any YouTube videos. I'll see you in the next one.